And I started this protest to unify, amplify Black voices, and to have more understanding, because shooting someone 7 times in the back is unacceptable.
How did society get to this point where there's so much division on race?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are scared to talk about it because they're scared of being wrong, or they're scared. So that put us in a place where we don't talk about it, like how you can't talk about religion or race or politics. I feel like that's a big part of it, is people are scared. And a lot of it is the police system. It needs to change. The way they treat people of color is disgusting. And I think a lot in Reedsburg it's very rural. And I think there needs to be more people who are like talking, speaking up, even like white people, because this is predominantly white, even white people who need to speak out because they're scared, but they can't. You need to have these hard conversations.
Why do you think it's difficult for people to speak out against injustice involving another race?
Yeah, because they feel like they're over-speaking. Like, I was like that for a while. I was scared that, like, even this protest, I've been really, like, nervous to put myself out as, like, I'm doing this to be a good person. Like, obviously, but this is not about me, and I feel like a lot of people struggle with that. And a lot of people struggle with, most people here are Republican and have that kind of mindset where they think very hateful things, but it's so normalized to the point where anyone saying Black Lives Matter are like, it's like a crazy new idea, which is unacceptable. I don't understand people who think that way, but there's so many, and it needs to change.
People have gathered in Reedsburg today to stand up against police brutality. We are in favor of good, fair policing, but there have been some oversteps lately that are a trend that really concerns many Americans. And so we're seeking justice for minority groups that have been disproportionately affected by police brutality.
And where do you think the conversation is at today? Why has it become so divisive? Why is this a divisive topic?
You know, that's a really important question. And I think that some of our leaders really are instigating fear and painting people that are concerned about racism as radical or violent. That's why I made the sign that I did today. It says, "We all want freedom and safety."
There's a small contingent of counter protesters out there. I've not heard their message. I did see a little interaction down there. Can you describe that?
Sure, it was very hateful and verbally aggressive, saying no one cares, you're terrorists, you're violent, America is done with you. But I see a line of people who are peacefully holding their signs, and the aggression that came was filled with facts that weren't true.
All right.
So it can't be facts, right?
Sure. And if I could, just have you elaborate a little bit on your observations, like your role in the community and how you have these conversations with folks about this current division in our country.
My role in the community is an educator. I work for a nonprofit, and some of my posts on social media have been aimed at talking about why people are saying Black Lives Matter instead of All Lives Matter, and showing that there's this common goal of safety in our country, of freedom in our country, and that all people deserve that. And so my stance is for the common good.
What's your observations with what that conversation is kind of formed into, and any concerns you have with that?
Well, I watched some parts of the Republican National Convention, and I saw a lot of messaging that was fear-mongering, that seemed to increase divisiveness and paint a picture of Democrats or fellow Americans that wasn't based in fact. It was an exaggeration of the worst, painting it as that's what everyone is. And you know, I have a background in science, and to me, data, reliable data and facts are really important. So I try to find reliable sources. At the DNC, Democratic National Convention, I saw more a message of let's unite as Americans for the good of everyone. Those have been my observations, but I haven't seen all the speeches for both. I haven't yet. I hope that we can stop filling our ears with these fear-mongering messages, because it keeps us in a real fight or flight part of our brain that keeps us in us versus them and keeps us in this attack mode that really makes it so we can't hear what our fellow Americans are thinking and feeling. And so if we can stick to messages that are about unity and betterment for everyone, I think we'd go a lot further.
The laws don't apply to you animals. You'll be just fine. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Your message is done. Go home. Nobody cares. Try not to burn the city to the ground. Let's not go violent, people. We know that's what you like to do. You like to get on your knees, wear your mask, chant like animals, and burn cities to the ground. That's what you do. She's just screaming because she's an innocent little child. That's what she is. She's a spoiled little brat. Are you getting pissed off? Oh, there's a shot. Right there. The police are the only thing keeping you guys safe. That's right.
That's true. That is true.
No justice, no peace.
You guys can do better.
No peace.
Do better.
No peace.
I'm older than all of you. That is please.
So I grew up in a very diverse community, so I had no idea that as an adult this was going to still be such a problem, and it's honestly just disgusting that there's such hateful people who are grown adults and can act this ridiculous, and all over us not wanting to have people be murdered in the streets uncalled for.
All right. And what's your observation of the current dialogue, the level of dialogue in this country about policing and racism?
Well, I feel like it's very surface level. It's not getting nuanced enough, and I think that's a lot of the problem is a lot of people don't want to listen. They don't want to hear something that opposes their view. They're not willing to open up to that, and so they just want to hear surface level stuff and cherry pick their facts and use that for their justification.
Do you have any observations comparing life in Houston versus this small town?
Oh, it's much different here, and it's very surprising since that was the South that I see many more Confederate flags here in Reedsburg than I ever did in the South. Other than small towns, it's kind of similar there in small town respect, but it's not like this in Houston at all. It's such a diverse melting pot, and I would honestly say you run into people who don't look like you much more than you do people who do.
When you think about small towns and how they recognize or fail to recognize institutional racism, what are your observations of this small town?
I think everybody just wants to ignore it and push it to the side and say, oh, that's just our small town way of doing things. This is the way it's always been, and they're very opposed to changing and evolving with the times. I can only imagine that it's going to get more tense after the election, no matter what happens. Either way, I imagine that this is only going to pick up.
This world is full of sin. All lives matter. Jesus made all of us. He loves all of us no matter what color our skin is. I have never discriminated against a child in my daycare. I've had Native Americans. I have had African Americans. I have had Caucasians. I have had all races in my childcare. I have Hispanics right now. I had a foster son who was African American. I do not discriminate.
What do you dislike about this conversation that we're both on this
I do
side?
not like that they're focusing on just one race. I believe that's racist when you put a word in front of lives and just say Black Lives Matter. All lives matter.
Sure.
They are all important.
Sure. Do you think there's any racial inequity in this country in terms of law enforcement or prisons or
It is everywhere. It is
racial
in
inequity?
every city. It is in law enforcement everywhere. We all have our faults, but we all need to start working on getting together and working together and getting along.
Okay. Okay. So
Loving one another, helping each other out. That's what Reedsburg, our own community is about. When someone has cancer, we pitch in, we help the family out. It doesn't matter what race they are. When we had 2 big floods in Reedsburg, we all pitched in to help our neighbors out.
are you kind of opposed to doing this today, or are you just not agreeing with it, or what's kind of your position?
I am not agreeing with it because they're focusing on one race alone.
It would help. It would help.
Yeah, but I'm not worried about you, all right? I'm worried about her.
I know. I'll tell you what.
Well, hold on, are they? Okay. If them there and you guys stay here, you guys can holler across the street. No. You don't respect property. Whoa. Come on, man! What the fuck? You know what? Bullshit. This is bullshit. Hey guys, let's go! Come on! Go! Hold on. We're not listening to shit. Oh, but you want to stick up for him? Guys, you can't listen to the law? Get the fuck out of here! This is bullshit, guys. I know you got your marching orders. We got this. All right, we got this, guys. We got it. Bosses don't let you. You did so. You did that. But you're not doing it when these cities are burning to the fucking ground. I understand you. I'm saying that. In Reedsburg, it don't matter. Because you're out here and someone getting raped and living, bro. You're okay with that. You're only good. One side of the fucking issue. Because I don't understand because you need the audience. I don't care the audience. What I care about you need the audience. That's what I care about. I know. You guys are not allowed to do your job. No good argument. Notice I didn't say you're not doing your job. I said you're not.
I grew up in LA, sweetheart. Don't talk shit. You're not from around here. I'm from around here. Don't talk shit. I'm certified.
Everything that is hate-filled,
Thank y'all for being on your best behavior and showing genuine compassion.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares. So much better. Yes, I'm proud of us.
When y'all are calling everybody over here racist, and y'all don't even know us. That's the same thing as me calling you a criminal just because you're black. It's not right. You know what I'm saying? It's not right.
All I'm saying is this: like, everybody, they new to this thing. So at the same time, like I wouldn't call you racist because I don't know you.
Right.
At the same time, we just have two different opinions. Like I'm not every different situation we have. Every black person isn't innocent. And,
Right.
And this is for me.
And every white cop isn't innocent either.
That's what I said.
You know what I'm
Cops
saying?
out here,
Like,
there's good
we understand
cops.
this.
And the thing, like I would say for Black Lives Matter, it's not saying that black lives are like better than, because at the end of the day, everybody does matter. I get that part.
What are your observations on the current state of race relations and equity in this country?
Well, they're bad. I mean, there is none. As far as I'm concerned, all lives matter. And they're here marching for a black man that got killed. I feel sorry for him and other ones that got shot. But where are they when a black child gets shot by a black man? There is no word in the media anywhere. It is silenced.
Share your observations on race and how we feel about our own race and other races in this community.
Well, I'm not sure if I have a good grip on that. I just know that, okay, we don't have as many blacks as most communities. As a white person, I respect the black person as long as they respect me. And yes, we've had different backgrounds growing up. But that should not be bringing on all of this tension. There shouldn't be all of this fighting. There should just be more sitting and talking and trying to understand each other.
So I think some of the rage with protests now have to do with a disproportionate number of black men specifically being shot or handled in a way that results in their death in law enforcement custody. Do you identify with any of that conversation, or do you think that's kind of overblown?
Well, would they be mishandled if they weren't resisting arrest? Because most of them that have been mishandled, shot, or like this last guy, he was resisting arrest. So, if an officer stops you, show him respect. If he says you're under arrest or you have to come with me, just do it. That's follow the law, like the rest of us. If I get stopped by an officer, I'm not going to run and have a high-speed chase. I'm not going to fight him. I'm just going to do what I'm told to do.
The militia participant in Kenosha who brought an AK-47 to that to protect businesses. What are your thoughts on that situation?
Well, I didn't really study that. I didn't look a lot up on it. I'm not for that kind of violence. But also, I am not for them going in and looting and burning and robbing, calling it a protest. That is a riot. It is not a. This is a protest. It's been fairly quiet. Mm-hmm. No burning, no looting, no burning.
I did see one arrest, it looked like.
Okay, one arrest, but nothing like with these other ones.
Yeah. Were you expecting this group of people to burn, loot, or riot tonight?
No.
Me either.
I just came down to see what was going on.
You know what the man who was taken into custody was arrested for?
I believe the officer heard him say that he was going to fight him.
Oh, so like a threat kind of?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So actually, that man was released. They had a discussion about it. Okay. He believed that he heard him say it. Said that he was going to fight him, and that's why he was taken into custody.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Yep. No problem. What are your observations on the overall relationship here between the two sides of the sidewalk?
I mean, so far everyone's kind of respected each other. I mean, you're only going to get as much as you can. So.
And what are your observations of the conversations going on out here today, literally on both sides of the sidewalk?
Well, from what I've seen so far is that the only instigators have been the side of the opposing this, the people who are opposing this protest. So
Can you describe that, please? What have you seen?
I've seen people yell at us. I've seen them tell us to go home. I've seen them to like calling us names and stuff for simply just standing here. So I guess. Sure.
What are your observations of the larger conversation about race at the national level and then in Reedsburg?
Well, I can know that there's a sign over here that says 60-something% of Americans do support the Black Lives Matter movement, and then in smaller towns.
I just want to interview this girl, if I could, please. I'll talk to you in just a second. If you just give me a little space.
And then you come to a smaller town after seeing like the difference. It's a pretty big contrast to see people who have not really left this area and left their small like towns. So it's really interesting, actually.
Sure. And so when you think about like inequity in terms of maybe how minorities are treated in this country and law enforcement, what are your thoughts on that, and does that impact a small town like Reedsburg?
It actually absolutely does affect us in these small towns, because what happened on August 23rd with Jacob Blake, I think, was a wake-up call, because we are so easily able to block out everything that we just don't want to, but when it happens so close and we're like, racism is alive, and it very much is happening. So how that impacts us is, I think, we have been seeing it over and over again, and we see it in little ways in our community. And when what happened in August 23rd, what happened to Jacob Blake, I think that really hit everybody a little bit close to home, because it is in our home state, and it's harder for us to ignore. And I feel like more people are picking up the responsibility to come to small towns, even though it's not really going to be as big of an impact as it would in a bigger city. It's still, everybody's doing what they can. So I think that is a pretty big problem to see, like, all of these people who just for a peaceful protest decided to come out here and like incite violence by telling us not to be violent. So I think it's very harmful.
Right. And I did ask one of the people on this side of the sidewalk, literally, if they thought that anyone here today was literally going to be burning buildings or breaking glass. They did not think that was going to occur. However, I did hear a few folks that shouted that several times today.
Yeah, if anybody does want to burn down buildings, I will be
telling them not to, because that's not what we're about.
Yep.
We're not violent. We're here to show them that we can be peaceful and we can make change peacefully.
Sometimes people paint a picture for a conversation to frame it, us versus them, good versus
Yeah.
bad. Have you seen any of that happening today?
I have. I've been seeing, well, literally, there's a physical divide of what they think is good and what they think is bad and what we think is good. And it's kind of sad to see people so angry over human rights.
So the other conversation has to do with just basic politeness. Do you think overall people were kind of polite today, or would you say that there's a little bit of rudeness today?
No, as you can see behind me, there's not very many polite, polite, actual, rational conversations happening. It's mostly just screaming. So whoever can scream loudest. So.
Okay. And going forward, how do you think you can help move this dialogue in a positive way that'll kind of impact Reedsburg positively? What are your plans?
I think everybody should be signing petitions, sharing information, like letting people know like the truth and helping them out to understand like what's actually going on around, so people can have like the right information, people can be educated. Coming to protests, just calling out hate when you see it.